All right, so let's turn our attention back to the polygrid device. I've armed this MIDI track because I'm using a MIDI keyboard, and I'm going to go ahead and click this device button so I can see the grid environment up here. Now, I already mentioned that when I play a MIDI note, this automatically generates sound. Why is that? Well, when I'm playing a MIDI note, that MIDI note is going to send a note on message. We can think of that as a gate message. All right, a gate is basically something that's on or off. And as I look over here, this AR, this is my volume envelope. All right, that's what it's being used for now anyway. And this module has something called a pre-chord, which means that this is able to respond to something without us patching anything, without us actually connecting a physical cable to it. If you see where my mouse is at, it says gate with devices incoming notes. This is a pre-chord, which means that every time I play a note, it's automatically going to send a gate message to the envelope. That gate message will trigger the volume envelope, which will allow us to hear the sound that's coming from my oscillator. Now, if I was to disable this by pressing this icon here, you'll notice I'm playing notes. I can see with this yellow light here that I'm sending MIDI notes, but I don't hear anything because there's nothing that's actually triggering the volume envelope. Now, let's say that I don't want to use this pre-chord. What I would have to do instead is I'd have to get my own gate module and connect it here. All right, so that when I play a note, it's going to send a gate message to the envelope and trigger the envelope. I could find the gate module. If we look up here, these are all the different categories I can choose from. The gate module is an input-output module. All right, so here we can determine things that are going to allow us to receive something or send it out someplace else. My gate in is here. Now I could take this module and I could just drag and drop it on the grid like so. And then I could manually connect it by just clicking here on the output and dragging it to the input, and now it's connected. Or if I wanted to, let me just go ahead and disconnect this. I'll just drag from here and just move that. If I wanted to, I could also take this module and simply just drag it on top of where I want it to be connected, and Bitwig will intelligently connect it where it should go. So this is great. All right. So one thing that we've learned already is that if we want to take advantage of incoming information, we can go to the input output section and we can use the audio in, gate in, pitch in, all these different things so that our modules inside of the grid can react to things that are happening outside of the grid. Now, with that said, I don't really need the gate module now because I can just use the pre-chord. Let me turn this back on. Cool. Going over to the oscillator over here. Our sound is starting from an oscillator, but there's more than just this particular oscillator. I'm going to go up to the upper left and I'll click the oscillator category, and I see there's a number of different oscillators here that I can choose from. Ultimately, the oscillator is going to determine the timbre of the sound, the sonic quality, the sonic characteristics of the sound that you're working with. I'd like to make a bass sound. And generally, when you're working on more of a bass sound, you don't really want anything that's going to be too bright or necessarily harmonically rich, unless you're going for something a bit more aggressive and kind of dirty. So in this case, I think a triangle waveform is actually a pretty good place to start. But let's say I wanted to try and explore some of the other modules. Instead of dragging and dropping these into my grid, I could simply just right-click on the module that I want to replace. Let's say I want to replace triangle with, let's try pulse. This is more of a square waveform. It's quite loud. Okay, a little bit too much. I think I'm going to go back to what I had before. Let me right-click here and go back to my triangle. Okay, cool. So I think that this will be a decent starting place for me right now. I think that I'm probably going to want to play lower notes with this. So as I look at the triangle oscillator, I see that I have a number of things down here at the bottom that are in orange. These are things that are going to let me change the frequency or the pitch of the sound coming from this oscillator. Here I have some numbers that are related to a ratio for the frequency that's being generated. Let's say I want this to be half of the current frequency. If I cut the frequency in half, it'll play this an octave lower. If I go to the second number here and just bring this up, now it's 1/2 the original frequency, and it's playing an octave lower. Nice, I like that. Now, if I wanted to change it in actual semitones, I could do that over here. Or if I want to change the frequency, so that way I can change the corresponding pitch without necessarily changing it based on semitones. I could do that over here, but that's not really relevant right now. But I'm in a good position because now I have this triangle oscillator generating some lower notes. I understand that every time I play a MIDI note, that it's going to trigger this particular envelope. And the reason why is because this gate pre-chord is enabled. Now, is this the envelope that I actually want to use? I'm not quite sure yet, but the next thing I should do is probably bring in a filter and get a good idea of how I can utilize the filter within this device that I'm creating.